So today we're going to be doing front brakes on a 2001 Honda CRV. Look in front of you, these are a majority of the tools we're going to be using today. It's pretty simple, just basic wrenches and impact. And most importantly, be sure you have your proper jack stands and car jack when you're underneath a car. If you look right in front, you're going to see the parts we're going to be using today. It's just rotors and front brake pads. Alright, be sure to put your jack, properly line up the jack so it's on the jack points of the vehicle. You want to jack up the car so the front wheel's off the ground. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the front wheel. To do this, you can either use a 19-inch socket or a 3/4 inch with a removable impact. When you have the car in the air, make sure you have jack stands placed under the vehicle at proper points in case the jack blows out and the car doesn't fall on you. With the wheel, kick to break the rust seal, pull the wheel off. Alright, the next step on a lot of vehicles today, especially Hondas, they have these little retaining screws in here and they get rusted in, so we're going to have to take these out. This is a good time because it's still a solid unit. So I like to spray a little oil on there while I get everything ready just so it penetrates and loosens up the seal for rust and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now's also a good time, since if we're just doing brake pads itself, we would just be removing these two bolts up here to release the caliper housing. Because we're doing the whole rotors, we got to remove the whole caliper hanger itself. So we require 17mm bolts. There's two of them behind here, and we're going to remove these nuts right here. And next we're going to remove the 17mm bolts that hold the whole caliper housing on there. With the bolts removed, this whole assembly is going to loosen up. But first we're going to remove the screws in here with the impact. While it's loosening this one out, it came pretty easily. Still a couple hits. This one here is rusted on there pretty good, so I got to walk it out with constant hitting. Finally loosened up. Without an impact hammer, this job right here would be pretty much impossible. The next option is, if the screw heads do strip, you're gonna have to use an air impact hammer with a needle point in order to try to walk it out. If that doesn't work, you just have to drill it out. But with the impact hammer, if done correctly, it won't release. And now that we were able to loosen up the rotor, it came right off. Okay, if you looked, this rotor's in pretty bad shape. Scored pretty bad. When a rotor's this bad, you're going to get a lot of vibration in your steering pedal, and the car might also pull to one side. Not to mention, you're not getting a good contact between braking surfaces, so you want to make sure these are always in good shape. The next step we're going to do is we got to compress the piston. This piston right here, we got to compress it in to make room for the new brake pads. The first thing you want to do when you do this is open up the the reservoir, you want to unscrew the cap on the brake fluid reservoir to allow any excess fluid so there's no pressure buildup. Okay, you can use a C-clamp. I bought one of these brake compressors, and what I like to do is you can use a old brake pad. You put the little compressor in here and you just turn it, and it pretty much squeeze it till it goes all the way down, and it will compress the piston inside of the caliper to make room for your new brake pads. But you'll make sure you push it all the way down so you get a nice flat seal. As you can see, the more I turn it, it's compressing the piston into the caliper housing. This is also a good time to check to see if there's any leaks or cracks. Any fluid leaking, that means you're either going to have to rebuild your caliper or you're going to have to put a whole new assembly. This one here, if you look inside, it's nice and dry. The rubber boot's not cracked. When you're doing these types of jobs, I know a lot of people, they'll spray brake cleaner all over the whole braking area to clean it, and they'll spray brake cleaner in here. Brake cleaner and all those types of fluids will actually damage these rubber seals and cause them to crack and not last as long. So I try to do it minimally. If I do have to spray it, I spray everything so it doesn't hit any rubber seals or any of the rubber surfaces. Now's a good time. These are the little metal stainless steel tabs that hold the brake pads in. Now's a good time to either clean it or replace it. As long as you give a good cleaning, they should last a long time. So what I like to do is get a little brake cleaner. Now remember, try not to spray these rubber boots right here because we don't want to damage those with a brake cleaner, okay? And just spray the top of the metal. Just give it a light spray. And I use a little copper brush. And you just go over it one time just to clean off all the corrosion. Okay, just a quick light one. Now's also a good time if you just want to quickly, there's no rubber surfaces here, just give it a quick spray just to clean off all the surfaces, get off any corrosion or anything like that, rust deposits. Try not to hit your axle shaft boot, you don't want to weaken that. So all I like to do is just give it a quick little spray just to clean it up a bit. This is a new brake rotor. You want to make sure, prior to putting it on, you want to make sure everything lines up, make sure it's the proper one. Sometimes the companies get them confused, so you just want to double check so you don't lose time. Another thing is, before you put the rotor on, rotors are always shipped and they're covered in a light grease, either Cosmoline or some other packaging grease. It will burn off, but you don't want to affect your the new brake pads and getting contaminated. So a good thing to do is just get your brake cleaner and just give it a quick spray. You don't have to spray too much, it's just enough just to hit the surfaces and remove the grease layer. You don't have to go crazy with it. Like I said, just a quick burst. That's all you gotta do. Alright. Next up is you want to line up on Hondas your set screws. You want to find the two set screw holes, and you want to make sure they're lined up correctly. And you just put the rotor right on there, okay? For this one, we're going to use new set screws, so the other ones were damaged on removal. Before I put my set screws on, or whenever I do any type of brake job or any work on a vehicle, I always coat the surfaces with a high quality anti-seize compound. And you have to be very light on it. You don't have to put too much. I see some people put a lot. You just need to coat the threads just enough that it's on there. And this will make it easier if you ever have to remove it again. So just a quick little dab, and you put the set screw in. Remember to coat the threads with anti-seize prior to installing it. And what you can do is just, fairly simple, screw it in. You don't have to put too much pressure on it. Remember, these are just to hold the caliper the rotors in. Put the second one on and make sure to coat that one also. And just hand tightening would be fine for that. And next up, we're going to put back the hanger. We're going to get back those 17mm bolts, and like I said before, just put a dab of the anti-seize on those, because now we've broken the seal. Just to make sure, just a quick dab of anti-seize will be fine. Grab the seal and the hanger, and we reinstall. What I like to do is when I reinstall parts, hand tighten them first. Sometimes with the impact, it spins so fast it can strip them. This way at least you have a little bit more control. Alright, now is also a good time to properly torque the bolts down. Alright, for these bolts here, when I change brakes, I like to properly torque down all the bolts. Okay, it's just a habit of mine. I'm just going to use a basic old-fashioned torque wrench. Okay, and when you do your car, make sure you look up the proper torque specifications. You can either go online or look in a vehicle manual, and it'll tell you exactly the proper torque of your vehicle. And it's a good thing just to make sure that all the bolts are properly even, so the pressure is spaced out amongst the metal evenly. Alright, replacing the brake pads is actually very simple. Only a couple steps you got to do. For your rear brake pad, you got to remember on Hondas, a lot of them, you can look at your owner's manual of course, but you want to keep the wear marker in the upright position. Okay. Second thing I like to do is these are your friction points. The top and bottom is what sits in the housing. So you just want to give a light coat of grease on those areas, anti-seize, just so they don't keeps it from getting stuck. You just do a quick coating on each side like so. And I'll touch it with my finger because you don't want to get it on the actual braking surface, just on the rabbit ears they call it. Here, like so. And that'll keep it just from seizing up so it properly slides inside and outside of the hanger. Okay. Now we're going to do the other side. Same thing. I'm going to coat the rabbit ears. A little bit of anti-seize. So, and just set it right into the brake housing. You want to make sure that when this goes in, it properly moves, and it's not, you don't have to force it in or force the pads to seat properly. If you have to force it, that means either your housing is bent or there's something wrong. Maybe your pads are the wrong size. So you want to make sure that it properly moves, because when your car stops, you want it to release. If they're tight and you have to pry them in there, when you release the brake, they're not going to release, and you're going to have premature brake wear. Not to mention your gas mileage is going to be reduced greatly. So you just want to remove this bungee that's holding it. And be careful that you don't damage the brake hose in this process. And you just want to push back these sliders, and it pretty much seats itself right in there. Get the locking screws. Now these are very delicate because a lot of the cars have aluminum housings. So like I said, you want to hand tighten them until they seat. And then tighten it down later to proper torque. Inside of here, in this car we didn't have to do it. You can also repack this with silicone grease. You want to be very careful not to mix greases. When you mix different greases with rubber, it causes a chemical reaction. It can actually eat the rubber. So you want to make sure that the grease you use is compatible with the rubber, that won't actually destroy it. But on this car, everything's moving freely, so we don't have to touch that. You just want to make sure that you put the little anti-seize on there just to keep it from shutting. And just be careful not to over tighten these, because it is a 14 millimeter nut, but they're very easy to strip where you could possibly break the housing inside. Like I said, I don't like to use the impact when I'm putting these on, because I like to have the control of tightening it. The impact sometimes tightens so strong that it might actually break the nut, or break the head off or something like that. So this way I have a little bit more control. Alright. Like I said, depending on your vehicle, you can use your torque wrench and properly torque it down to the proper specs. And a lot of times these are, like I said, they're aluminum, so the torque specs can be very light compared to the back bolts. Though a lot of people think putting the wheel back is a simple process, there are a couple things you have to do to make sure it's done correctly. You want to make sure that the wheel is seated properly when you put the wheel. That it's actually got a flat surface. And what I like to do, I like to start all the nuts first by hand. That way you don't cause damage to the threads. Impacts can actually do a lot of damage to wheel threads if you don't do it properly. Good thing about this impact is it's got a slow mode specifically designed for this. When I hit it, it goes slow. The next thing what you would do is when it's properly seated, you give one just a light tightening, and you want to go in a star pattern. Make sure it properly seats all the nuts. Alright, and then what you're going to do is you're going to follow up with the torque wrench. A torque wrench, and you're going to go around and torque each lug nut to the specified torque specification located in your owner's manual. And be sure when you torque them down to go in the star pattern, same method. Alright, we properly torqued all the lug nuts to the proper torque specifications located in the owner's manual. Now that the vehicle's off the jack stand, it's a good time to check your tire pressure. Make sure you have proper air pressure in your tires. And you're going to put the cap on the reservoir. Now when you start your engine, once you complete the other side, you don't want to just take off down your driveway or down the street. The first thing you want to do is pump your brakes a couple times. What happens was, because we compressed the caliper all the way down, again, away from the brake pad. So what you're going to do is you're going to pump your brake pad a couple times to put pressure on there So therefore you have brakes. Make sure your brake system works. Not to mention you want to make sure everything works. You don't want to just go down the street and crash into a tree or crash into a mailbox or something. And other than that, the brake job is complete.